So, Emma, tell us about how you got involved in politics in the first place.
Well, I suppose my journey into politics is a little unusual. I was someone who found myself in a quite unusual situation with a legal challenge where I was bringing my US husband into Northern Ireland as a spouse of an Irish citizen, and we encountered a challenge with the British Home Office where they were not accepting the terms of the Good Friday Agreement around the right to be accepted as Irish or British or both. We went into that, as people that were not politically active, but had to become so very quickly, and took forward a 5-year challenge over the right to be accepted as Irish or British or both, which did in the end change domestic UK immigration law. And doing that, I had to work on a cross-party basis, so I had gained the support of the majority of Northern Ireland's political parties. I had support in Westminster, in Dublin, in the US, in the European Commission, and through that I found that actually, do you know what, you can affect change in politics, and I've got a taste for it now.
You're standing in a very large constituency that has a very large rural area, but with a lot of small towns. That's not unlike where you lived in Magherafelt, isn't it?
Well, it's a little bit more rural, but it does sort of take me back to my roots in terms of it being a smaller place to live. My husband's obviously from Los Angeles, so we have spent time in larger cities. But during the pandemic, we reassessed how we wanted to live, where we wanted to live, and we moved to County Fermanagh, and we really love living out in the countryside. But I can see, and part of the reason why I'm running, I can really see the difference in terms of investment, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of, in terms of where Fermanagh is in decision-making spaces in Stormont and in Belfast. And that's why I decided to run, because I really want to try and put rural communities on the map and represent this constituency with a much stronger advocate for trying to connect this island.
So there are already a lot of options for voters in the constituency. What are you offering that isn't available from the other parties?
Well, I'm offering an independent voice, and we really need more of those in the Assembly. I think that we're currently living through a time of immense change. There's been a lot of social and political change over the last 5 years. People are moving away from binary concepts of identity, from binary concepts of political allegiances. And now really is the time for more independent voices, more young voices, more women in politics, and I tick off all those boxes. And in terms of what I give to the community in Fermanagh and South Tyrone, is I give that independent voice that's free from the constraints of party politics, that can bring forward the issues that truly matter to the constituents into the heart of policy making and decision making in the Assembly. And I'm also someone who has a proven track record of delivery. I work for the people, and I want to try and reframe how we think about politics. I want to move away from this term politician and go back to basics in terms of public servant and public representative. And I really want to take forward an inclusive approach to politics, a new approach to politics that is more inclusive in general.
Well, given the structure of mandatory coalition at Stormont, how can you be effective as an independent? It's a very tight, specific structure.
It is, but that's why we need to change things. And there is, of course, space for independence in the Assembly. If we look at Claire Sugden, for example, she served as the Justice Minister. And of course, that came about because neither of the two big parties wanted the other to hold that brief, and wanted, I suppose, a more independent or neutral voice in that position. And the Speaker also is someone that can be an independent. So there is room in there. And if we look at the rise of independence across the UK and in Ireland, we'll see a really strong independent coalition in the south. And we see a lot of independents being elected at a local level across the UK, because people can see the value of having independent voices in there. And what an independent in the Assembly can do is dilute the toxic politics that we have, hold parties to account. And I really see myself as kind of a unifying voice, because I've got parties to work together before, and I believe that I can work in a way as an intermediary between parties to help bring forward issues that will work across the board.
What do you feel is the future of the executive and the Assembly in Stormont?
Well, I think there is definitely a risk that we won't have an executive and an Assembly when we go back after May 5th. And I think that a lot of people are concerned about that in terms of the future of power sharing. I do think that we need to go back to basics in terms of how this place works. We need to go back to basics with the Good Friday Agreement. And we also need to consider how the system works, if it's actually representative of the diversity of society that we have today, or if perhaps it's working against the diversity of society.
Do you take a position on the border poll?
I do indeed. I am someone who supports a United Ireland, but I'm not someone who would describe myself as a nationalist. So I try to, I suppose, buck some of the stereotypes around this particular position. I believe that it is only good practice to plan and prepare for a border poll whenever that might happen. I think that the process would take a very long time. We have to look at things around education, around the health service, around how basic things are going to operate. And we need to have more conversations, there needs to be more dialogue. So for me, it's really essential that we bring back the Civic Forum, which form part of the Good Friday Agreement. I think it's important to bring forward an All-Ireland Citizens Assembly because we need more spaces for people to talk, to understand each other, to break down barriers between communities, and to prepare for whenever the vote would be held.
You've spoken a lot in the course of your career about human rights. How well do you think the human rights agenda has been delivered?
It hasn't been delivered, and it is a point for me in terms of, and a priority for me, is around delivering enforceable human rights. If we look at the Good Friday Agreement, it really envisioned a rights-based future for Northern Ireland, but that hasn't been delivered on. We still don't have a Bill of Rights, and the vast majority of human rights protections under the agreement have not been implemented, and there's not enough focus on the fact that this hasn't been delivered on. In 1998, the Good Friday Agreement included a lot of provisions around human rights, and at that time, it kind of put us in a place where we were a little bit ahead of the South, and that's flipped now. So if you look at the progress that's happened across the border, it's in a much better place in terms of human rights protections. And we do have this risk now with the British government reviewing the Human Rights Act, which is going to put some concern in people's minds around the operation of the ECHR. So I'm a very strong advocate for enforceable human rights.
And in what way does the border affect your constituency?
Well, this constituency is a border constituency, and people cross the border every day. I mean, I cross the border technically when I go into my kitchen. So it is in people's minds, and any return to some sort of border in the United Ireland is something that concerns people in this constituency. But they operate in a much more inclusive cross-border way, and that just becomes part and parcel of daily life in a constituency such as this. I do think we need to find ways to better connect the constituency to the rest of the island, because there is a real lack of public transport and connectivity. And I think we also need to look at all island healthcare as well, because there is some cooperation in terms of cross-border healthcare, but I think that could be increased, and I think we should be looking at that too.
So just to look at your pledges, tell me what you feel your top 3 issues would be, and how those are chiming with the people that you're talking to while you're out canvassing.
Well, it is difficult to put it into 3 categories. But public transport is a real issue for me, a big priority for me, and I'm hearing it at the doors. The reality is that the majority of people across this constituency do suffer from transport poverty and struggle to be able to access healthcare due to a lack of public transport, also the education system too. And I think that we're missing an opportunity when it comes to transport here, because people are reassessing how they want to live, where they want to live. And with that, if we made this constituency more connected, more accessible, it would be more attractive to young professionals to consider moving into this constituency, which in turn would reinvest in rural communities. It would boost the economy, boost tourism, and it would also help us with our climate targets. So for me, it's really important to get this on the agenda. More green buses, less reports and reviews about trains, and actual trains would be great. As well as that, then healthcare is a really big issue for this constituency, as I say, about cross-border healthcare, but also about having permanent, attractive jobs. There is a pay disparity between people that want to work out in Fermanagh and South Tyrone and those in Belfast, so we have to address that to, again, make it attractive to people. And then educational reform is a really important subject for me. It's something I really want to see take forward in terms of integrated education, access to mental health services, modernising the curriculum, and increasing funding into arts, music and sports.
And in terms of what other parties are saying to you, are you meeting with disapproval about the fact that you are standing in an already crowded field in terms of your own constituency?
Oh no, we're all good sports. There's lots of camaraderie, and it's good crack to be speaking with the other candidates. You know, we're all supporters of democracy, and it's been very supportive in terms of the other party candidates, meeting them on the campaign trail, speaking with them ahead of the election. May the best one win.